from the Mercy One studio.
Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. It's time to hear from the top Christian litigators in the nation who have come forward to tell us the truth and help us defend our faith.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano, is in session.
And good Thursday morning from our virtual Mercy One studios in West Des Moines. Gina and I are both coming to you via Skype, so we're going to try and keep our technical difficulties to a minimum this hour. Gina, how are you?
I'm well this morning. Thank you, Deacon Mike.
This is the first time I can see you since you got back from Florida, because we're both on Skype where we can see one another now.
It works out a lot better that way, I think.
I think it will. Okay, we have a nice program for you today. What we're going to do is we're going to be talking with Jaffer Jamil, who is professor at the Anton Scalia School of Law at George Mason University. He served as associate counsel to the president in the White House in the George W. Bush administration, and we're going to talk to him about how the courts, especially the Supreme Court of the United States, is handling things during this shutdown. I know they're doing phone conversations or phone hearings and things like that, so it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. We'll find out how the courts are doing it. And then we're going to talk with Robert Muise, who is the chief counsel and co-founder of the American Freedom Law Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we're going to talk about some of the constitutional challenges to some of these stay-at-home orders, especially as they pertain to church services. So that's what we have online for us today. Gina, do you have a prayer to open us up with?
Yes, I do. On this very coronavirus heavy show today, I'm going to pray for peace around the world. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world. Peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of the earth. Turn your way of love, those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred. Strengthen us in hope and give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among the nations and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Thank you very much. You know, doing a show from home over Skype is a little bit different than doing it in the radio studio. And what I'm concerned about is I've got a cat wandering around here that likes to help me when I'm writing my stuff on the computer, and I have a feeling she may want to pop in and help us out with the radio program. So if you hear a meow or a screech, that's Gilligan.
I just hope she doesn't hit your power button. I'm not sure I can do the show without you.
Well, I'm sure you could, but I don't know how she can hit the power button from where she's at. But she does find a lot of things to hit. She's turned off my answering machine. She gets up by the window to look out, and she pushes the wrong buttons, and I don't get any messages. She's changed the alarm clock so it goes off in the middle of the night. And I'm sure she doesn't intend to do that, but that's just the way cats are, I guess.
I read your most recent column, and it sounds like she drinks your coffee in the morning also.
She does. She sticks her head in the coffee pot and laps it up. And so now I have a buzzed cat.
I have never heard of that.
Yeah, she does. And it's a good thing I only have coffee in there. If I didn't have something else that might really hurt her.
Yeah. Well, good. So we have a very coronavirus-centric show today.
Right.
Who would know that a virus could affect religious liberty so closely?
And it does. And we're going to be back with Jaffer Jamil in just a minute. We're going to take a short break to pay some bills around here, and then we will be back with our first guest.
Impoverished children break everyone's heart, but poverty seems like such a big problem. What can one person do to make a difference? For 17 years, Blessman International's passion has been to connect the resources of our donors with sustainable programs that impact the lives of impoverished children in South Africa. Our donors are feeding thousands of hungry children every week, providing basic water and sanitation for impoverished communities, and sharing the love of God in practical ways every day. Go to www.blessmaninternational.org and make your donation today. Is it time for a new roof? Then it could be time for you to get to know Bell Construction. Bell Construction is a roofing company entering its 30th year of business. They specialize in residential re-roofs, light commercial jobs, and have the experience to meet all of your roofing needs with personal service. With Bell Construction, the owner will come to your home or place of business in person to inspect and ensure the quality of work that you deserve. They pride themselves in working with you on a personal basis and making sure you are satisfied. Bell Construction, 515-963-4494.
Nearly 64% of all abortions in Iowa are chemical, or more commonly known, the abortion pill. At Intervisions Healthcare, we do not provide the abortion pill, but we do provide the medical information required to make an informed decision. If a woman regrets taking the first pill, she can come to Intervisions to help reverse the effects. Our nursing staff is trained in the abortion pill reversal protocol, a relatively new medical procedure, but we need your help in getting the word out. For more information on the free medical services at Intervisions Healthcare or to support the mission, visit ivhcare.org.
Thank you, Big Red Q Quick Print, for underwriting the sports report. Family owned and operated since 1980, Big Red Q Quick Print is a full-service print shop ready to help you with all your printing needs with speed and accuracy. Forms, manuals, brochures, letterhead, envelopes, business cards, custom invitations, design, and bindery. Big Red Q Quick Print, located across from Merle Hay Mall. Online at bigredq-desmoines.com. Big Red Q Quick Print. We make printing easy.
What is the best gift ever? Giving a Catholic education is at the top of my list. Your contribution to CTO helps families send their children to our Catholic schools who otherwise could not afford it. In giving to CTO, you receive the best tax credits ever. Pledge or donate online at ctoiowa.org. The bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Support for Dowling Catholic Sports 365 is provided in part by Ashworth Vision Clinic with 2 licensed optometrists, Barbara Sheets, a Dowling Catholic graduate, and Dr. Todd Pedig. The Ashworth Vision Clinic team provides complete eye exams, contact lenses, glasses, glaucoma testing, and pre- and post-operative care. Ashworth Vision Clinic is located at Ashworth and 60th Street in West Des Moines, 515-440-4610, online at ashworthvision.com.
And we're back. We have with us now Jaffer Jamil, who is a professor of law at George Mason University in the Anton Scalia School of Law. And as I mentioned before, he served as White House counsel, so he's got a lot of experience. And I want to talk to him today about what is going on with the courts, and notably the Supreme Court, in this corona atmosphere. So, Jamil, good morning. Welcome to our program, and thank you for joining us.
Deacon, thanks for having me.
Certainly.
Good morning. This is Gina here. We're glad you're able to join us today. Why don't you give us a little idea of what your connection with the Supreme Court has been over your career?
Sure. So I, when I was a young lawyer, ended up working at a law firm in Washington, D.C., where there was a young partner named Neil Gorsuch at the law firm, and we overlapped for a couple of months before he went to the Justice Department. I then, 7 months later, went to the Justice Department also. He became a mentor to me, and when he became a judge on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, Colorado, I went and spent 4 months with him as one of his first law clerks on the 10th Circuit. And then, of course, a decade later, that same young partner at that law firm became a Supreme Court justice, and I had the chance, again, much later in my career, to go work at the Supreme Court for him for the first 4 months of his time on that court. And so I've spent some time at the court building inside the chambers working with Justice Gorsuch. It's been an honor to work with an amazing American like him.
I can only imagine. So to give us an idea for the listeners who are not, Deacon Mike is an attorney. You may not know this, sure, but he is an attorney, a very well-established one. And myself,
I try and be an attorney. The license says I can practice law, okay?
But I have no background in law. I'm more from the activism side. So for our listeners who are not lawyers, why don't you give us an idea of what the Supreme Court, the importance of the Supreme Court and this, the effect of the shutdown on that importance?
Of course. Well, as your listeners probably know, the Supreme Court of the United States is the highest court in the country. And it hears a very small number of cases a year, about anywhere, ballpark about 70 cases a year. That's on about 7,000 petitions for review it receives. So that means about 1% of the cases that people ask it to hear, it hears. And when I say hears, what that means is it agrees to review the case. It's a case that might arise out of the federal courts. It might arise out of the state courts where there's a dispute or an issue of federal constitutional law or a federal statute. And they ultimately resolve these disputes between the lower courts, the courts of appeals, the district courts, the state courts, on issues of federal importance or issues of federal law. And so, these are big cases. They matter a lot. Some of them come out are non-controversial. They come out 9-0. There are 9 Supreme Court justices. You need 5 to decide your way for you to win in the Supreme Court. And at the end of the day, the Supreme Court is the final voice in the United States on questions of what the Constitution means, what the Constitution says, and on what federal law means and what federal law says. And so that can have a big impact on people's daily lives. It can have a big impact on what states can and can't do. And so it's a very important institution, as you can imagine. And so with respect to coronavirus, the Supreme Court, like everybody, is now, the justices are working from home. And they're not working in chambers. They're not hearing arguments. What will happen is when the Supreme Court grants a case, the parties will file briefs, and then they'll go to the court and they'll make their case in about an hour, half an hour each side, to these 9 justices, and then they'll go and decide the case. So now the court has just announced in the last few days that they will be holding oral arguments, as they call them, but they'll be doing it by phone. So this is a new change in their practice. They don't typically do that, and so we'll see that beginning. So just like every one of us in America who are sitting at home, thinking about how to make our days work out and our work get done, Supreme Court justices and their staff are doing the same thing from their homes and not being at their workplace.
Wow, that'll be a big change for the attorneys making the arguments, because I have an Italian descent, and a lot of time I make my arguments using body language as well as my voice. How do you think that'll affect some of the outcomes of these cases?
That's a great point. Obviously, a lot of the thinking about these cases is done beforehand by the justices. They read the briefs very closely. Their staffs read the briefs. They have these law clerks. Each of them has 4 law clerks. The Chief Justice gets 5 because he's got a little bit of a higher workload. And they read the cases. They think hard about them. They come up with questions to ask. Oral argument is an opportunity for them to get clarification, right? This argument you made, it's the argument made in the opposite way by the other side. Why are they wrong? Why are you right? They get to tease out some of these harder questions. And so it can make or break a case oftentimes, even though all the work is done ahead of time. And you're right. People often communicate by body language, intonation, and the like. And that's hard to communicate on a phone call. And so it may change the dynamic. I don't know that it'll change outcomes necessarily, but certainly can have an impact on how the justices hear and receive the case. As you know, some people are visual learners, and that can make a difference too.
Exactly. And it would be difficult for the arguments or the attorneys making the arguments because they can't see the reactions of the judges either.
No, that's exactly right. And one of the interesting things about the Supreme Court in particular is that the justices sit in almost sort of a modified horseshoe. And so they can see each other and the lawyers, and oftentimes the justices will try to use their questions to lawyers to make a point to the other justices and sort of try to tease out a line of argument. And oftentimes you'll know that they're doing that if they look over at the other justice, or sort of their body language also conveys something. And so you're right, not just for the lawyers, but for the other justices. Some of that can be conveyed in tone and questions, but also some of that, as you point out rightly, is conveyed in sort of the mannerism when you're there in person.
So I had read somewhere that when the shutdown came into effect, the Supreme Court had canceled many cases, not canceled, but postponed. So the last, maybe 30 days, they haven't been hearing any cases. What cases what happens to those? Now we have a backlog, I imagine, and do they start from where they left off, or do they start with what was scheduled originally and then try to fit in these other cases that were skipped over?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know exactly how they're handling it. My assumption, and I could be mistaken, but my assumption is they will certainly try and get through all the cases this term. Now, the term, interestingly, the Supreme Court runs from October of 2019, typically through the end of June of 2020. Now, they can extend that if they want, and so they may extend it, right, in order to get all the cases in. I expect that they will hear arguments in all the cases they have to hear arguments in, and we'll try to decide all those cases in the given time frame. In terms of scheduling, what they'll probably do, and I should double check this, but my assumption is that they will continue to hear the cases they were scheduled to hear, and for the ones that got missed during that 1 month period, they'll try to reschedule them sometime in that window, and hold a series of additional argument sessions if I had to bet. But I bet they'll try to get through all their work and try to get all that work done by June, and if not, then maybe they'll extend into July a little bit.
So I'm wondering if they may decide to, I guess, defer on the oral arguments for a while and just take some of the cases in brief without the oral arguments.
Deacon, that is a possibility. They could do that. Typically, by this point in the term, they've decided to have arguments in these cases. They could switch that in some cases. They do that once in a rare while. But my guess is they'll try to get through the oral arguments in as many of these cases they've granted arguments in as possible. And my guess is if I was a betting man, and again, I'm not saying they will, but that if they had to, they'd probably extend the term a little bit to try and get this stuff done and get the arguments done. We do know that they are going to do some arguments by phone, so we'll see how that goes. If that works well, then perhaps they continue with more of that.
When they schedule the oral arguments, and I take it when they have oral arguments, each side has a set amount of time, and that usually is standard. Can they shorten those oral arguments? Can they go from, say, an hour to half an hour or something like that to kind of move through them a little bit quicker?
Sure, they could. They could tighten up the argument schedule. They could also extend it if they needed to. In other cases, they've been known to do that once in a rare while. And so we could see that happen, too. That's a great thought about how they might deal with some of this. And there is, by the way, as you were saying earlier, there is some precedent for moving cases to the next term. So, for example, if the justices can't agree because there's a justice who's been recused or a justice has passed away and their successor hasn't been confirmed, sometimes they'll want to reschedule cases because they don't have unanimity or they don't have a majority on one side or another, or they just think it's important to wait for the next justice to join the court, so they may reschedule to the next term. That could happen here, too, just because of the workload. It would not be unheard of. The case will get decided just in the next October term a few months later, and so that's also a possibility. But we'll see going forward. There are important cases, as you and your listeners, I'm sure, know. There's the Louisiana hospitals case. There's cases involving religious schools, which, of course, are critical to your listeners and very important for the nation. Right. Cases involving Second Amendment rights. A lot of really important cases this term.
So usually there's interested individuals and members of the press allowed into the hearings or during the arguments. Will they be allowed to be on these calls?
That's a great question, and a question I unfortunately don't have an answer to. I will look into that, and if you have me back on, I'd be happy to let your listeners know. I don't know. I would assume the answer is yes. Of course, they'll have to figure out how to put them in listen-only mode. My guess, I do know that they will definitely be making public the audio of the arguments, as they have been done pretty regularly now at arguments of the court. I don't know if actually on the call itself they'll be able to have members of the media and the public. I think their general inclination is to do that, yes, but if not, they will immediately after the argument make the audio available on the Supreme Court's website. So at a minimum, within an hour or two of the argument being completed, the public and the media will have access to that argument if they're not on the call itself.
And then their conferences after the oral arguments, are they going to, I suppose, hold those by Skype or something like that?
That's a great question. The court, as you correctly point out, will meet in conference before cases are argued to decide what they're going to have, what they're going to hear, right, what they're going to grant for that term. And then every day after argument, they go, they take a break, have lunch, and then they meet and they discuss the cases that were argued that day. And oftentimes will hold their vote on how they want to decide it, and will assign opinions and the like. If there's agreement on the outcome of the case, that's going to be harder because they're going to have to probably do that telephonically also, and even more so perhaps than what happens during the oral arguments. Body language, intonation might matter a lot, and so it'll be interesting. I don't know if they'll get together in person to do that. I would assume not, given the CDC recommendations, and just to be candid, the age of some of the justices. But I guess they'll do it telephonically. I do know that when there are other matters that need to be done in an expedited manner, say there's a death penalty case that's being appealed, they do sometimes do conferences by phone to discuss the case, and so they'll do that in a secure manner. But yeah, I would assume they'll do conference by phone is my best guess. I don't know if the Supreme Court will do Skype or Zoom. I think that might be asking a lot of these 9 Supreme Court justices. We do have some young justices like Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Gorsuch, but some of them are older, and who knows what they have at their homes in terms of laptops.
I'm sure they all have some young clerks that can help them set up the Skype and whatever they need to do.
Sure.
Just one other thing I wanted to ask you. You mentioned the assignment of cases. Why don't you explain to the listeners how the written assignments are made? In other words, who's going to write the majority opinion, who's going to write the dissent, who's going to whatever?
Yeah, so what will happen is the justices will meet after an argument. They'll meet in this room and they'll discuss the case. And then they'll take a vote on how the case should come out. And if there's a majority, that is to say 5 justices or more, in one direction, the most senior justice in the majority will assign the opinion to either themselves or another member of the majority side, right? And so, and seniority on the Supreme Court
is always the Chief Justice if he's in that side.
It was about exactly, Deacon. I was about to say exactly that, which is that seniority is determined by how long a justice has been on the court, with one exception. No matter how long the Chief Justice has been on the court, if he or she is in the majority, they will assign the case, in this case, Chief Justice Roberts. But if it's not the Chief Justice, if they're in the minority, then the most senior justice will assign the majority opinion. Same thing for the dissent. If there are dissenting voices, and sometimes there are and sometimes there aren't, then that the most senior person on that side of the case will assign a justice, and they'll either be themselves or another member of the dissenting side.
Okay, and then additional dissents and concurring opinions can just be done, I guess, almost at will.
Correct, exactly right. Any justice can write separately if they choose to, and those separate writings can be as much as dozens and dozens of pages. It can be as simple as a single line: I disagree or I agree for the following 3 reasons. And what's interesting about that is, depending on how a majority is composed and what people agree with in the majority opinion, parts of an opinion might be binding law, and some of them might simply just be prescriptive guidance from the court if they don't have a majority of voices or justices voting for that proposition in an opinion. So it's a really interesting dynamic when you think about what is the actual law that comes out of a given case.
Yeah, I know in reading some of the dissents and even the concurring opinions, it kind of modifies what might have been a strong majority opinion. Now, all of a sudden, you got some questions about whether, you have a majority of the judges on one point that feel differently.
Exactly, and they might agree in the outcome, but not how they got their own legal reasoning. And so sometimes if that's a difference, then how the courts below, the courts of appeals and the district courts apply that, can make a big difference in outcomes for individual cases going forward.
And how future lawyers in the cases argue those cases too. That
exactly right. Deal. Exactly right. Oh, and one other thing we should mention before we leave this topic is that as the justices are writing their opinions and they're circulating them to the other justices to get them to join their opinion, agree with their reasoning or the like, and not write separately, majorities and views and ultimate case outcome can sometimes, in rare cases, change even, right? Because people are convinced by the force of somebody else's views. And so there's a constant dialogue going on at the court as the opinions are being written all the way until the day the case is decided. Now, typically it'll come out the same way they decided at conference, but not always. And so that's an interesting part of the process. So these judges are not necessarily, lockstep with a position or a political party or a view. If they're good judges, they're going with where the law takes them, where the force of the arguments are, not just some pre-decided view of the world.
Yeah, I've heard of some majority opinions being turned into dissents because the majority switches while they're passing these drafts around.
Exactly right. And, one of the things that Justice Gorsuch always talked about when he was a nominee, and I've seen him do this when he was a judge on the 10th Circuit and since he's been a justice, look, if you're a good judge, you're not going to always agree with the outcome in the case from a personal perspective, right? You're going to want to go where the law requires. Because remember, the job of the judge is not to invent the law or to create it. In our system, that's reserved to the president and the Congress, the political branch of the government. The job of the judges is to interpret the law written by our framers in the Constitution or written by our legislators in Congress and the president in our federal laws. It's not to make it up as they go along. And so sometimes judges will have to decide cases in ways they don't like. If you're a judge, Justice Gorsuch should always say this, if you're a judge who always agrees with the outcome in a case, then you're probably not a very good judge.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Jaffer, we're just about out of time now, but we do want to have you back because I want to pick your brain about how some of these cases on the docket might come out. But we'll get you back and talk to you a little bit later about that. But thank you for joining us today. We certainly appreciate your time. And like I say, we'll have you back. Thank you.
Thanks much, Deacon Gene. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Professor Jaffer Jamil of the Anton Scalia School of Law at George Mason University. And we will be right back after these messages.
Is it time for a new roof? Then it could be time for you to get to know Bell Construction. Bell Construction is a roofing company entering its 30th year of business. They specialize in residential re-roofs, like commercial jobs, and have the experience to meet all of your roofing needs with personal service. With Bell Construction, the owner will come to your home or place of business in person to inspect and ensure the quality of work that you deserve. They pride themselves in working with you on a personal basis and making sure you are satisfied. Bell Construction, 515-963-4494.
Nearly 64% of all abortions in Iowa are chemical, or more commonly known, the abortion pill. At Intervisions Healthcare, we do not provide the abortion pill, but we do provide the medical information required to make an informed decision. If a woman regrets taking the first pill, she can come to Intervisions to help reverse the effects. Our nursing staff is trained in the abortion pill reversal protocol, a relatively new medical procedure, but we need your help in getting the word out. For more information on the free medical services at Intervisions Healthcare or to support the mission, visit ivhcare.org.
What is the best gift ever? Well, some might say a Catholic education, and I agree. But if you think you can't afford Catholic education, think again. Apply for CTO, and you could receive up to half your tuition for kindergarten through 12th grade. More information is online, ctoiowa.org. The bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Support for Dowling Catholic Sports 365 is provided in part by Ashworth Vision Clinic with 2 licensed optometrists, Barbara Sheets, a Dowling Catholic graduate, and Dr. Todd Pedig. The Ashworth Vision Clinic team provides complete eye exams, contact lenses, glasses, glaucoma testing, and pre- and post-operative care. Ashworth Vision Clinic is located at Ashworth and 60th Street in West Des Moines, 515-440-4610, online at ashworthvision.com.
Thank you, Dental Associates, for underwriting Dowling Catholic Sports 365. With over 40 years' experience, Dental Associates is a group dental practice with the mission of promoting optimum health and well-being to all patients, providing preventative, restorative, and cosmetic dentistry for the entire family. Message underwritten by Dr. Kenton Gleichman, Dr. Steve Karbaka, Dr. Christine Mulcahy, and Dr. Ben Nagel. Dental Associates, addressing your smile, needs, and dreams. Online at DesMoines-DentalAssociates.com.
Here's your forecast on Iowa Catholic Radio. Low pressure moving to our south will bring us some rain and snow showers through the afternoon. A little bit of accumulation and our high topping out in the mid-30s. Snow likely overnight, couple of inches possible with our low in the upper 20s. Mostly sunny and a little bit warmer tomorrow, upper 40s. The weather is brought to you by Divine Treasures, a Catholic book and gift store serving the Des Moines community for over 25 years. I'm meteorologist Steve Hamilton on Iowa Catholic Radio.
Welcome back to Iowa Catholic Radio's Faith on Trial. We're having some technical difficulty. It sounds like Mike's mic might be muted. We will try to bring him back in here in a second. We're looking forward to a conversation with Robert Muise, the Chief Counsel and co-founder of the American Freedom Law Center from Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's our expert today to talk about constitutional law dedicated to defending religious liberty and the freedom of speech and the right to life. Are you with us, Robert?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Why don't you give us a little bit of a highlight on, till we can get Mike back in here, a little highlight on the church closings that have been mandated by this coronavirus shutdown.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Here I am in Michigan, and in fact, I just filed my second lawsuit against the governor for the draconian measures that she put in place, the executive order. But she has permitted religious worship places to be open. Unfortunately, the local bishops have decided on their own to not have public mass or any other public gatherings. Although at my local parish, the priest leaves the church open. People can come in and pray in the church, keeping social distancing. He's still holding confessions throughout this time. So I'm really grateful for that. But the bishop has not allowed public masses. So it's kind of interesting. And I've obviously been reading and seeing these cases across the country where these churches are suing to try to have services, whether they're the Protestant services, and some of them they're not even allowed to have people driving into the parking lot and observe the services that are taking place, and then the police are walking around to the vehicles and handing out tickets to the individuals, and if anything, they're the ones that are more likely spreading the disease than people who are staying isolated with their own household and their own vehicles. So it's really these are very interesting times. And, if we lose liberty, it could be lost forever. And I think it was John Adams that reminded us of that. And which is one of the reasons why I filed 2 federal lawsuits against our governor for the various restrictions that she's put in place. We have to be exceedingly vigilant during this time and encroachment upon religious freedom. Right? It's one of our fundamental freedoms. It's set forth in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And, we have an absolute fundamental right to the free exercise of religion. There is case law going way back to, the 1900s from the Supreme Court that does vest, quite a bit of authority in executives, governors, and the likes when there is a serious public emergency to put in place measures that are rationally related to promoting public health and to avert this danger. But if there is and this is almost a direct quote from the court, if there's, a plain, palpable invasion of rights secured by fundamental law, in this case the First Amendment, it's the duties of the courts to so adjudge to give effect to the Constitution. Again, that's what the Supreme Court said. So while there is a great deal of deference and there might be measures that can be put in place or even mandated that could protect, the public health and public safety, to just have an outright ban on religious worship or people being able to travel to places of worship and the likes, that's incredibly dangerous. And I know there's legal challenges to some of these across the country, and I do hope that they ultimately prevail.
Did they get me back yet?
Yep,
I can hear you.
Okay. I don't know what happened to my thing. I think Kat may have disconnected me or something. Robert, we're glad to have you back. We've had you on the program before in our earlier iteration of the program a couple of years ago. Now they've put us back, and when I saw some of these cases coming up, you were the first person I thought of to talk about the religious liberty and some of the other liberties that are being infringed upon with some of these stay-at-home orders. I know you've had a couple of cases recently with your governor up there, where you've been suing her, and I also know you've been suing your state attorney general, Ms. Nussel, and we'll have to have you back and discuss all of that at another time, especially when we get my technology working here. But what's the rub against the governor right now, according to your lawsuits that you filed?
Right. Well, the first one we filed, actually, we did very quickly. It was on behalf of pro-life demonstrators. Our governor, she's a progressive. She's allowing, the marijuana shops to stay open. She's allowing the abortion centers to stay open, even though abortion's an elective procedure, never necessary for to save the life of a mother, and is contrary to what the stated purpose of the order is, to sustain and protect life. So she's leaving them open. And her executive order, the stay-at-home order, allowed for individuals to engage in outdoor activities such as cycling, hiking, walking your dog. And I represented 3 pro-lifers, one in particular, Andrew Belanger, who was outside of an abortion mill in Detroit, and 15 police officers. We have this all on video. You can't make this up. 15 police officers, 8 cruisers showed up for this one pro-lifer holding a sign on the public sidewalk preaching. And he was issued a criminal citation for a misdemeanor for violating the governor's order. So meanwhile, on that same public sidewalk, you could walk your dog, you could jog, you could do, any number of things, but you can't engage in what is constitutionally protected under the First Amendment. So we sued, and that case got resolved very quickly. After we sued, about 6 days later, the governor was essentially forced by our lawsuit to give guidance that clarified that her orders do not violate the exercise of First Amendment rights outside, and that these pro-lifers were permitted to do what they were doing. So we entered into a stipulated order, which was filed this week and signed by the judge, setting forth that guidance as a matter of a court order permitting First Amendment activity on the public sidewalks, and dismissing the criminal citation that was issued against Andrew Belanger. So that was a quick strike victory. And interestingly, yesterday, and this got a lot of national attention, there was a huge protest outside of our Capitol by people who are just incensed with the restrictions that our governor put in place. Thousands of people assembled. They drove their cars through the city.
It's been all over the national news, yeah.
It has, yeah. And I was thinking, you
weren't in one of those cars, were you?
No. Actually, I was busily working on a second lawsuit that I filed against the governor, challenging some of the very same restrictions that they were protesting. But I was thinking to myself, it's because we filed our lawsuit a week ago, and forcing the governor to acknowledge that the First Amendment rights are still protected, that none of these people were issued any citations for doing so. So these things have, ripple effects in ways that promote the public good, which is why, we're a public interest law firm, so we see cases in the public interest. The second round of litigation, on April 9th, she doubled down on her executive order and just imposed some absolutely absurd restrictions. I'm representing 3 people in this lawsuit. In fact, I'm one of the people. I'm one of the plaintiffs. I'm suing on my own behalf, and 2 other Michigan residents she's banned travel. If you own a cottage up north in the state, right, an isolated cottage in the woods on a lake up north, you can't travel from your own residence to that cottage. I mean, I could drive to the... I saw
that in the news. Yes, that's a big story.
She allows people to drive for gas and groceries and everything else, as she should. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in China, for goodness sakes, with some of these restrictions. But they can't even go to... So my clients could literally drive to the county where their homes are located. Their homes up north are located, a second residence for most of them. And, go to the grocery store and go to get gas, but I couldn't, walk on my property, or else it's a criminal violation.
Yeah.
I mean,
and when you're in the grocery store, you can't buy non-essential items.
Well, it's interesting because some of the things they close off. I could go to there's nothing under the order that would prohibit me from going to a grocery store and buying a pack of gum. I mean, it's just some of these things are ludicrous. You can go to a pet store. I could go to a pet store and buy, food for my goldfish, but I can't go to my own home up north.
Yeah.
One of the other things she did is she modified she kept in place these old regulations, federal regulations, in terms of what's considered critical infrastructure, which was dated March 19th. There were new ones issued March 28th, where the federal government made clear that the firearms manufacturers and ammunition manufacturers. I'm a strong advocate of the Second Amendment. I was in the Marines for 13 years. I'm an avid hunter. And the Second Amendment's important. I mean, it's there to prevent tyranny against the government, especially during these times of crisis where there's a lot of panic, unemployment, poverty. I mean, there could be a proliferation of crime. And she purposely relied on the old critical infrastructure regulations, which did not include, firearms manufacturers, retailers, and shooting ranges and the like. So she shut that down, which is a violation of the Second Amendment. So again, I could go to a pet store and buy, food for my goldfish, but I couldn't go to a firearm store and buy a firearm or ammunition, as it is my Second Amendment right to do so.
And then if you go to a big box store, you can't buy a garden hose.
You can't buy. So I can, you can go to Target, I guess, right? And you can go buy a gallon of milk, but you can't, take 2 steps to the left and pick up a birthday card for your wife. These things are crazy. And one of the other reasons that I'm suing is that, I've been blessed with 12 children, my wife and I. We have 3 of our kids are married. They all live locally. We have 10 grandchildren. I had 10 grandchildren, 2 more on the way, and I can't see them. If my kids come to my house, we could all be charged with a criminal misdemeanor. This is China. This is unbelievable. I had a good friend that just last night sent me a text asking, "Is it okay if I go to St. Thomas and pray at the church? I don't want to get ticketed." And I'm looking at this text and thinking, my goodness, seriously, this is where we are in the United States of America? It's everybody looking over their shoulder. 2 kids were fishing on a dock near my daughter's house, who lives not too far from us here, and she lives in Dexter, the town over from Ann Arbor. And the police ticketed them. A neighbor apparently called the police on them for these 2 boys that were sitting on a pier fishing. It's become crazy. And
it sounds like all of these injustices on the liberties of Michiganers,
Michiganders, yes.
There you go. They have kept you incredibly busy during this shutdown. How are the courts, how are they operating to be able to respond to these kinds of things?
Well, I typically file in federal court, and all federal courts belong to this electronic filing system, which is actually very good. I can literally sit at my kitchen table and file a brief in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit in California, simply. So you have to be admitted and everything else, and I am admitted to many courts around here. But we file electronically. We've been serving the complaints, requesting that the government officials that we're suing, that they accept service via email, which all of them have. I mean, they've actually been cooperative. In fact, we sued the governor yesterday, and we sent the complaint to her chief legal counsel last night, and he sent us an email this morning agreeing that he'll accept service. And everything is filed electronically. The courts have been holding hearings when necessary via Zoom or a teleconference, and so they've been managing. We can't shut down the courts because that's our only recourse to be fight back against these really dictatorial orders that are coming from the governors. I mean, it's
draconian.
It's tyranny. It's draconian restrictions, and it's pure tyranny. And I'm sitting here in my home, in Michigan, wondering, my goodness, this is again. I feel like I'm living in China. And one of my biggest concerns I have, and one of the primary reasons why I'm fighting all these things as hard as I can, is that I don't want this to become the new norm, right? That's because these flu viruses. Granted, the COVID-19 has been unique in so many ways, but the jury to me is still out in terms of how much of a crisis this was compared to other times like swine flu and the likes. But every year, end of fall, early, through the winter and early spring, it's flu season. There's some new strain of flu. There's some new. Are we going to be going through these sort of gyrations every single time? Because politicians feel that if they don't impose all these restrictions and these social, distancing and everything else, that they're going to be held accountable for every person who might pass away from this virus, even though every year, tens of thousands of people die from the flu. It's just, whereas the Rahm Emanuel said never let a good crisis go to waste. That's what I'm concerned, is that they're going to use this crisis to waste our Constitution.
I can understand the conservative nature of some of these people, that they want to make sure that they take care of everything. But what else motivates them? I mean, this seems to be kind of like a power surge that went to their head or something.
Yeah, well, there's the old saying that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think there is this thirst for power, this sense that they're totally in control, and it's very it's a frightening dynamic that we're seeing take place. And for our governor, quite frankly, I think she was trying to audition to be the VP nominee, right? She's the one that gave the response to the State of the Union.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, this thing has blown up in her face. Whoever's been advised.
Oh yeah, she shot herself in the foot with this.
I think it's over. I mean, it's over for her. This has been horrible. In fact, I had heard there's a recall petition that's out there that has like hundreds of thousands of signatures. So
the technicality on that is, I understand the petition's not in the proper legal form that it should be in. So they're going to have an excuse maybe not to put that to a vote or something. But
and part of the problem is going to be and this is one of the other things that's interesting. Right, you have a right to canvass the signatures and to get these petitions, but people can't. So I think they've been trying to sign them electronically and do in other ways, which might make them defective. But the sentiment is there, and so when these things lift to the point where people can actually get out there and start signing, I think you're going to see this thing coming back up again. But it's
Robert, we're about out of time right now. But before I go, I want you to give us your webpage address for anybody that'd like to follow you or even make a donation to your organization.
Well, I appreciate it. We are a 501c3. All the legal work we do is pro bono for the good. We don't charge for our services. We rely on generous donations. AmericanFreedomLawCenter.org. You can donate right there online. You can sign up for our email blast, and that way you'll get updates on all these cases. If you like, and we don't flood your inbox. We only send them out when absolutely necessary. So, but I appreciate being on your show and for you.
Well, thank you. And we're going to have you back because I want to talk about Dana Nussel, your Attorney General up there in another case, and I know you're going toe to toe with her in something else. So we'll bring you back for that. Thank you for joining us today. We certainly appreciate your time. Robert Muise, Senior Counsel and co-founder of the American Freedom Law Center. This is Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. We will be back in a minute.
What is the best gift ever? Giving a Catholic education is at the top of my list. Your contribution to CTO helps families send their children to our Catholic schools who otherwise could not afford it. In giving to CTO, you receive the best tax credits ever. Pledge or donate online at ctoiowa.org. The bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Support for Dowling Catholic Sports 365 is provided in part by Ashworth Vision Clinic with 2 licensed optometrists, Barbara Sheets, a Dowling Catholic graduate, and Dr. Todd Pedig. The Ashworth Vision Clinic team provides complete eye exams, contact lenses, glasses, glaucoma testing, and pre- and post-operative care. Ashworth Vision Clinic is located at Ashworth and 60th Street in West Des Moines, 515-440-4610, online at ashworthvision.com.
Thank you, Dental Associates, for underwriting Dowling Catholic Sports 365. With over 40 years' experience, Dental Associates is a group dental practice with the mission of promoting optimum health and well-being to all patients, providing preventative, restorative, and cosmetic dentistry for the entire family. Message underwritten by Dr. Kenton Gleichman, Dr. Steve Karbaka, Dr. Christine Mulcahy, and Dr. Ben Nagel. Dental Associates, addressing your smile, needs, and dreams. Online at DesMoines-DentalAssociates.com.
Doing what is challenging because it's right. That's Blackbird Investments. In 2013, Blackbird Investments was born from the inspiration of St. Kevin. When it comes to building real estate, they look for creative solutions by forming strategic alliances, creating energy-efficient buildings, and engaging with local craftsmen. At its core, Blackbird Investments believes in giving buildings a new life. BlackbirdInvest.com. Blackbird Investments, doing what is challenging because it's right.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Faith on Trial provided by Paul Martin and Paul Mitchell, owners of Imogene Ingredients. Imogene Ingredients supply specialized feed ingredients for livestock and pet diets to improve maternal and young animal health in both conventional and organic production. Information about Pharmatan and other products at ImogeneIngredients.com. Paul and Paul are members of St. Augustine's Knights of Columbus and encourage their brother knights to keep standing for their faith.
Thank you, Skeffington's Formal Wear, for sponsoring Dowling Catholic High School football. In business since 1951, Skeffington's Formal Wear offers quality service, style, and selection, providing tuxedos, suits, and casual groom attire for weddings, proms, and any other special occasion. Skeffington's Formal Wear, with convenient locations in Des Moines, West Des Moines, Davenport, Coralville, and Ankeny. All locations are family-owned and operated by members in their respective communities, fitting you for life celebrations. Online at skeffingtons.com.
And we're back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. Gina, kind of interesting conversation today.
Yeah, I was very interested in all of the information about how the court systems are working during this shutdown. I'm thrilled to find out that the federal court system is so incredibly fluid and able to pivot to continue to operate on the behalf of American citizens. That's amazing to me.
Well, I think most states, I know Iowa does anyway, we have electronic filing here, so I can sit in my bedroom slippers at night and file something in a case that I've got going. And I know that in a couple of cases that I've had going on right now, we've skipped some hearings. We've just the attorneys have agreed that to continue the case, or we don't need to have a hearing on this issue or that issue, and we just get an order from the judge to go on. But it is causing some havoc, but fortunately technology, and I hope the courts are better than my technology where I go in and out on you sometimes, but the technology allows the courts now to do a number of things that we wouldn't have been able to do just a couple of years ago.
Well, and I think it's interesting that Robert Muise is so intimately involved in all of the attacks against the religious liberties and other liberties of people from Michigan, but this is happening all around here. I encourage people to take a peek at your column this week, because you really did a good job of highlighting what's going on in Kentucky and Mississippi, Chicago, Virginia, and many, many other states. Unfortunately,
that column, by the way, will appear in the edition dated the 30th. Those are done a couple of weeks ahead of time. Because I'm a columnist, they have to have it locked in early. Yeah.
That's good. I wondered if it was going to be this weekend or at another point. So it's very good how you highlighted it. I do have to point out, though, that in Virginia, unfortunately, there was a pastor who, I don't know if you saw that, but he had violated the order to shut down and did hold services. I think he's the bishop of an evangelical order tradition in Virginia. Both he and his wife, following that service, contracted the COVID, and he was later put on a ventilator. And on Saturday, he did pass. Right. So it is important to not protest these shutdowns on in a reckless manner, I would say.
Well, there's a great deal of difference between not going to a physical building where everybody's getting together and exposed to one another, and then trying to shut down church services that are being held in parking lots where people are sitting in their cars and they're hearing over the radio what their minister or their preacher or their priest is telling them. And there's a couple of places where they've done that, and these people have received fines, major fines, $500 fines. They've had their license plate numbers taken down, given quarantine certificates. And now some of this has been knocked out because there's been a federal judge that just before Easter ruled against one of the mayors that had imposed these fines. So the court, and now Bill Barr, the Attorney General, is coming down in support of these church freedoms. And so I heard yesterday there was another mayor, I think one down in Texas, who, after that statement from the Attorney General, kind of backed off on what his draconian rules were in these things involving churches. And some of it, I think, is I suppose, from a little bit of religious hostility, because these are people that are seeing that religion is not an essential service, but abortion is. Okay, going to a gun store is not an essential service. And going to Target and not being able to buy garden hose because you can only buy food and medicine there. These people that are making these decisions, they're going to have to answer in court for these at some point. Not all those cases will be decided early on, but they will linger on. There'll be cases that will be filed, and there will be hearings on these for the next year or so, and it's going to create an interesting body of law in the area of religious freedom.
I think Attorney Muise really was correct when he said that this virus shutdown has really allowed individuals in power to be able to feel out how much power can they really have, how much power can they control those things that are philosophically in their window. Keeping an abortion clinic open but shutting a church. That to me is the classic example of how there's a dichotomy in the reasoning.
That's right. And when I first heard of what was going on, he was the first one I tried to get a hold of to come on the show. And unfortunately, because everybody's working from home these days, it took me well over a week to finally contact with. It wasn't until yesterday that we actually got in touch with one another. So that was good. And hopefully we'll have more programs like this. But we're at the end of our time right now. And so let us end in prayer. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. That's it for now. For Gina, Noel, and myself, thank you for listening. Join us next week for another edition of Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. Faith on Trial, with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano. Faith on Trial, Thursdays at 10 a.m. on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and the Iowa Catholic Radio app.
Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.